The more you think about the movie Get Out, the more you feel like this. Hi everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to Tread Talks, where I walk on this treadmill to stay in shape while making videos for you fine people. One of the best things about the movie Get Out by Jordan Peele is how the revelations later on in the movie completely reframe everything that came before. And so I watched the movie again last night and I read online what people were saying, and I've compiled a huge list of all the things you either missed the first time or things you couldn't have realized your first time through. Now some of these you might say, Chris, really? You didn't get that the first time? Well, keep your judgment to yourself. Also, this is huge spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen the movie, get out now. You see what I did there? Anyways, let's move on. Here's everything you may have missed about Get Out. The first abduction in the movie is Andre, who later shows up as Logan. And the person who abducted him was Jeremy, the jiu-jitsu brother. And we know this for a couple of reasons. First, it's the same car that we see him driving later on in the movie. Second, he uses a grappling move to subdue Andre. Third, he wears that helmet that we see in the passenger side of the car later on in the movie. And finally, we hear the same music coming from his car later on. And in the movie, Jeremy represents a flat-out aggressive, open racist. He goes around subduing black people. He wears a knight's helmet, which is evocative of the white knights of the Ku Klux Klan. He drives a white car, much like the KKK rode on white horses, and he openly talks to Chris about his physical frame and his genetic makeup and how he could be a beast. And when we first see Rose in the movie, we see her picking from multicolored donuts and pastries. And it's kind of symbolic about what she's done with Chris, picking him out as the right colored body to bring home to her family for her parents to sell. And when Rose prevents Chris from giving his ID over to the police officer, she's not sticking up for her man. She's making sure that she's not leaving a paper trail. And now this one's a little bit of a stretch, but when you pull up to the Armitage house, you see two omega symbols in front of the house. Omega would be the last letter in the Greek alphabet, which may symbolize the end of Chris as he pulls up to the house. Now when they first talk, Dean, the dad, has a lot to say about how little he cares for deer and bucks, and it turns out that black buck was a racist slur in post-Reconstruction America, and it would refer to black men who would refuse to bow down to white authority. And so fittingly, that's kind of how Dean goes out at the end of the movie. And when Dean is giving Chris the tour of the house and they get to the kitchen, he says that they wanted to keep a piece of grandma there to remember her by. And that's when Georgina is first revealed in the movie. And later in the tour, Dean tells Chris that they hired Georgina and Walter to take care of his parents, and that when they died, he couldn't bear to let them go. When he says let them go, he's referring to the grandma and grandpa, not Georgina and Walter. And later on at dinner, when Jeremy, again the jiu-jitsu brother, tries to wrestle Chris and the mom stops him, he makes it clear that he wasn't going to hurt him. Now I see that he meant that he wasn't going to be damaging the goods. And when Chris goes out at night and he sees Georgina admiring herself in the reflection, what she's really doing is admiring her fresh, young, new face. And when we see Walter running at Chris, that's not just some random scary moment. That's Grandpa who's sprinting the way he did in his youth, still not over the fact that he got beaten by Jesse Owens. And then Chris gets hypnotized and gets sent down into the sunken space. And some people are saying that this is symbolic of the paralysis that people of color feel in racial America. And then the next day when Chris talks to Walter the groundskeeper and he tends to use this old-timey language to describe Rose, that's because it's really Grandpa in there and that's the language he would have used. And then when all the people show up for the party, we see that it's the groundkeeper that welcomes folks and they greet him with really affectionate hugs. And that of course is because it's Grandpa, it's the patriarch of the family, not the groundskeeper. And then in all the interactions with the people at the party where they're making these passively racist comments, what they're actually doing is sizing Chris up to see what skills he has to determine whether they're going to bid on him. And then at that party when we see Andre/Logan spinning around in front of the other people, it's because he's showing off his nice new body to everyone. And then shortly after that we see Georgina in front of the mirror adjusting her bangs. It's probably to hide the scar from her operation. And that's the same reason that we see Logan wearing a hat and that Walter is always wearing a hat as well. And you also notice that the people at the party are all wearing some form of red, while Chris is the only one who's wearing blue. Kind of an us versus them dynamic. And then Chris goes upstairs and eventually he meets Georgina, and Georgina tells him to not worry because, quote, she answers to no one. That's true because she's not the maid. She's the grandma. She's the matriarch of the family. And then Chris says to Georgina that he gets a little bit nervous when there are a lot of white people around, and the response that he gets from Georgina is that she starts to shed tears, while at the same time saying, no, 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 no. And what's basically happening here is that the real Georgina is responding in an emotional way to Chris's comments, while at the same time, Grandma is saying, no, 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 as she tries to fight for control of the body in that moment. And then downstairs, when the Asian man asks Chris whether it's more of an advantage or a disadvantage to be black in the US, he's probably weighing the pros and cons of being placed into a black man's body. And then Chris's cell phone camera gives him his first insight into the mystery of what's going on with Logan. In a similar manner, cell phone footage has been instrumental in shedding light on the instances of police brutality in our country. Now this next one is a minor one and it's a little bit of a stretch, but Chris's outfit combined with Rose's forms a kind of sad-looking American flag. And then when Rose suggests that she and Chris go out for a walk, that wasn't spontaneous and it wasn't for Chris's benefit. That was so that they could have the silent auction. And the code word was basically when the dad said, hey, who's ready for sparklers and bingo? That was her cue to get Chris out of there. And then the bingo game and the leather binds that they put Chris in, that's some pretty overt shared imagery with slave auctions and captivity. And then when we see Chris for the first time strapped to the chair in the basement, the first thing he does is try to gnaw the straps off, and that gives us insight that, hey, this is how he's going to put cotton into his ears later. And then when Chris rips the stuffing out of the leather chair, he's literally picking cotton to save his life. And then we go to Rod, who's watching TV with Sid, and in the commercial we hear a voiceover that says, a mind is a terrible thing to waste, which is very fitting based on what Chris is going through and because it was a slogan for the United Negro College Fund. And when Rod goes to the police to ask for help, they basically think it's ludicrous and they say that he's out of touch with reality, which parallels a lot of the reactions that people of color experience when they make claims of experiencing racism or some larger form of institutional injustice. And then we go back to Rose, who's eating Fruit Loops in a very weird way. She consumes the cereal separately from the milk, a metaphor for never mixing white and non-white things. And in addition to that, this scene was added kind of late in the game, as Jordan Peele found out that milk was growing as a symbol for white supremacy in America. You might remember this coming up in the news when Shia LaBeouf's live stream in protest of President Trump, when that was disrupted and taken down by Nazis and white supremacists that started shouting hate speech and proudly chugging gallons of milk in front of the camera. And then we see that Jeremy foreshadowed his own demise with the way that he described jiu-jitsu as being a chess game where you have to be one step ahead of your opponent. And basically that's what Chris does when he gets him to kick the door closed one final time so that he can stab him in the leg. And there's a similar situation with the dad when he talks about fire being a cleansing power, and really that's what happens at the end when his lab goes up in flames. Alright, so that's everything that I've come across, either in watching the movie again myself or reading what people have said online. But is there something I've missed? If so, leave it in the comments, I'd love to know. And if you like this video and you'd like to keep up with my content, please subscribe. And either way, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.